Today we'll begin in just Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the latest in our Sage Talk series, Why Do They Do It? Tips for Teaching Introduction to Criminology. My name is Amy Lammers, and I am the Criminology and Criminal Justice Marketing Manager at Sage. Joining me today is renowned author and professor, Dr. Stephen Tibbetts. Dr. Tibbetts is the author of Introduction to Criminology, Why Do They Do It? And numerous other texts at Sage. Dr. Tibbetts is currently a professor at California State University, San Bernardino, and has been pursuing an understanding of criminal offending for over the past 2 decades. He has attempted to discover the extent to which individuals' inherent dispositions and attitudinal traits contribute to their offending decisions, especially in relation to other factors such as demographic, developmental, and situational factors. Dr. Tibbetts' research has included work on the differences between men and women in their decisions to commit deviant behavior, as well as their perceptions of risk and consequences of getting caught. His additional research interests include the effects of perinatal disorders as an influence in future criminality, the etiology of white-collar crime, and gang intervention. Dr. Tibbetts has published 9 books and more than 50 scholarly papers examining various issues in criminology. He received the 2011 Outstanding Professor Award at CSU San Bernardino, and he's previously worked extensively as an officer of the court in providing recommendations for dispositions of numerous juvenile court cases from 1997 to 2008. Before we get started today, I wanted to let you know that this 1-hour webinar will be recorded and archived for future viewing. We will be sending out the link to view it to all registrants via email after the event. And we will also send out a post-webinar survey to get your feedback about what you thought of the webinar and what you would like to see in future webinars. Please do take a moment to complete that survey when it comes to you, as we greatly value your feedback. If any of you have any problems with audio or viewing mode during the webinar, please use the question and answer box to the side or bottom of your main presentation window, and one of our team members will help you just as soon as possible. At the end of the webinar, we will have some time for question and answer from attendees, so please use the question and answer box to ask any questions to Dr. Tibbetts throughout the webinar. Please also take note of the webinar hashtag, SageTalks, and feel free to tweet out any questions or comments throughout the webinar to @SageCriminology. We'll do our best to answer every question, but if we're not able to get to all of them in our time today, we'll give Dr. Tibbetts a chance to respond to those questions offline, and we'll include a link to those answers in the post-webinar email you will receive. During our time today, we will explore the challenges and opportunities when teaching an introductory criminology course. Without further ado, let me turn the mic over to Dr. Stephen Tibbetts.
Hello, I am Steve Tibbetts. I'm a professor of criminal justice at California State University, San Bernardino. Very glad to have you attend this webinar on Why Do They Do It? Tips for Teaching Introduction to Criminology. And I'll just jump right in, and the first thing I try to do, usually the first day of class, is to get students engaged by just showing them why criminology matters. And I point out that most of the people in the room, the vast majority of people, locked either their car or their home, or they have a safe to put stuff in. And there's no reason to lock your car or your house if you don't fear crime. So in that sense, almost everyone is a victim every day. They go out of their way to lock stuff up, and the only reason to do that is because they fear crime. So indirectly, at least, we all have been victimized by the fear of crime. So I think that gets them to wake up and go, oh yeah, okay. And then I say the flip side of that is that most of them broke the law today, that very day, by speeding to get to class. And I'm guilty of that myself. So that also gets them thinking. So it's just interesting for them to realize that they're victimized every day, and they're also violators nearly every day. Next slide. And also I try to get them to start thinking of themselves as experts in their own right. And they're surrounded by crime all the time. And you know, that's usually the first stories on the news in the morning and at night. And certainly on the internet, there's tons of crime stories there, and so and some of them have lived it. If they're normal people, then they offend in their teenage years and early 20s. It's actually people that don't offend, they're the deviant ones that never do anything that they couldn't have been arrested for, and they're very, very, very few in percent. So most of the people in class, again, if they're normal, then they did stuff, nothing too serious, but underage drinking, using fake IDs, petty shoplifting, things like that. So I try to have them think about reasons why they offended at those times, and or didn't in some cases, and that gets them thinking kind of as experts, again, in their own right. Next slide. And another way that I try to start getting them to think about themselves as experts on crime, or at least that they have an opinion, is I ask them, usually either the first day or sometime in the first week of class, and we're going to ask you this question too, but you know, I'll pose it to you. If you ask students in the first week of class, what do you think they would state as the primary reason people commit crime? And I usually keep it open-ended. For the purposes of this webinar, we actually narrowed it down to 5. You may disagree with all 5, but that's what you have to choose from. And so go ahead and answer which one of those options you think that would be most likely for the most students to answer. And I'll give you a few minutes.
Okay, Steve, it looks like we have our results. So we asked you, if you ask students in the first week of class, what do you think they would state as the primary reason people commit crime? So with 50%, we've got lack of parenting, choice A, with 50%. The next one is 33% for poverty, 17% for C, ineffective punishment by authorities, and 0% for both D and E.
Okay, I will respond. Again, I try to do this in the first week of class, and I like to have them write it down because it seems like students will actually discuss it. They'll try to defend their answer more if they actually wrote it down in their notebook or something like that. And well, and the reason why I do it early, not to complete of parenting or poverty. Those are things that aren't really focused on free will, free choice, or deterrence. Whereas C is really the more of the deterrent classical school type of approach. And I just try to tell them that, and some students have a hard time accepting this, because a lot of them, I think, come into the class thinking, oh, deterrence and free will, that's what I believe is causing crime. But you know, when you give them these other like parenting, poverty, you know, those things are very deterministic, and I try to tell them that, well, what you're saying really is that, you know, that our behavior is determined. It's not free will and deterrence primarily. So anyway, I think that that's a good time to pose this question to them as early on in the course when you're breaking down classical versus positive school. Next slide, and this kind of goes with that polling question, and that is that, again, to get them thinking of themselves as experts in their own right, is to have the, you know, you ask them what they think, and that's why I have them do that exercise where I take the poll. Again, I usually keep it open-ended, but I do have them write down what they think, and then we discuss it, and then I compare those variables to actual classical school and positive school. And again, I don't want to break it down. We can do that in a course when those theories come up, say poverty, when strain theory comes up, relative deprivation and things like that, then we can get into how many students answered that way the first day of class. And then you can always ask them at the end of the course if they change their mind based on all the theories that we've gone over and looking at the data and empirical studies. And I often see a change. So next slide. And another thing, again, to get them thinking of themselves as experts is to try to, even though they don't know the names of the theories that we're going to go over, at least they probably don't, I think it's important to point out that they live the principles of a lot of the theories every day, whether it's routine activities theory or broken windows theory, deterrence. Almost every day they're acting out, you know, they're living out the principles of the theory. And so when theory is brought up, they often think of them as very abstract, but there's so many examples that people can use to point out these various theories that they live them out. They live these out all the time. And then a teaching tip 1B there. I was very much against using discussion boards. I just thought it would be time consuming, which it is, and it really wouldn't be worthwhile. And I've gone 180, a complete turnaround on this. I've been utilizing discussion boards for a number of years now, probably about 5 years. And so I held out pretty long. And now I'm just a big believer in them. And you can have in-class discussion too, but I find that if you require discussion board entries, it gets everybody talking, not just the same 3 people in a class. And I'm just shocked at how many students, even though they're not necessarily getting a ton more credit for it, they respond. They're reading what other people wrote, and they're responding to it. So I'm a giant believer in it, and I never thought that I'd say that, but I think it's an invaluable tool, especially if you have a hybrid course or a fully online course. Sometimes you might want to, if you have too large of a class, maybe have them not do it every week or maybe once every 2 weeks, just to keep it manageable. I found that it's ideal up till about 25 students, and with 25 I could actually have 2 discussion boards a week, and I find it, like I said, very, very valuable. Next slide. One of my key things that I do in my courses, especially for theory, is to try to get them thinking about either a celebrity or a friend or somebody that they know, or sometimes themselves, to try to, as we go over the various theories, and so you're talking dozens of theories, in order to keep them straight, I have them try to remember a poster child to represent that theory. So, if we're doing labeling theory, they'll remember, oh yeah, that's Bob. I think that's what happened. Bob, he got stigmatized at a young age, and it made him worse. Here, just to help them out if they don't know anybody personally for different theories, I'll pull up like a celebrity or a notorious criminal like Al Capone here, and he would be a good example of Cloward and Nolan's criminal gang concept, because he ran a very organized syndicate in the Chicago area. Next slide. Also, I'll try to use the students' experiences to try to get them to realize that even though they didn't know the names of some of these theories, they live them out all the time. And broken windows is a great example, because whether they drive through or using other types of transportation, they go through different areas, and they know inherently where the good places are and where the bad places are. I mean, well, like that building there with a bunch of broken windows, just totally run down. And I use examples, it'll be overgrown grass and weeds, shopping carts in the lawn, rusted out cars on cinder blocks. And so even though they didn't maybe know broken windows theory, they're very aware already. And so you can use that as a good example. Next slide. Going back to kind of the poster child thing, I try to use weird crimes, because I think that the students will remember the case better if it's just a really bizarre story, and that therefore they'll remember the theory better. And here, by the way, this is from this month, and I find it's better to use if you can find a good one that's recent. This just came out, even though the actual act happened a number of years ago. But anyway, Jose Abreu, a White Sox player, very good player, he just had a reveal that even though this happened a long time ago, when he defected, he went from Cuba, and then they smuggled him into Haiti, and then he used a fake Haitian passport to get to the United States. And what the big reveal, as you can see on the headline, is that he ordered a Heineken beer, and see, they'll remember that. For sure, Heineken beer, and he used that to eat his passport, his fake Haitian passport. And this would be a great example of strain theory, because he went from making, he was basically, when he played in Cuba, he made $20 a month, $20 a month, and instead, once he got to America, he got picked up right away, and he got a 6-year contract worth $68 million. Students will tend to remember that story, even the details of it, and thus he'll be a good representation for strain theory, innovating a way to get ahead. So I try to use these weird stories, and in his case, he's famous anyway, but sometimes just these weird stories, people will remember them. And here's the next slide. Has another example, bank robbery. See, this tool works, and that's why the FBI has been using it for many years. And that is, the FBI tries to give nicknames to the people that rob banks, especially the serial ones, obviously. And here you're seeing he's known as the Black Binder Bandit, because he'll carry like a weapon, and then he'll carry his whatever cash he gets as he leaves the bank. Hit a bunch of banks, And so they call him, the FBI called him the Black Binder Bandit. Then you have weird ones like the Santa Claus Bandit. Obviously, he's dressed like Santa Claus, and he was very active during holiday season, so he didn't stand out that much. The Michael Jackson Bandit, who wears one white glove when he give them like a poster child for the given theories. I find that that works really, really well. Next slide. Another thing to focus on throughout the course is, because again, a lot of the students, they think that the theories are very abstract, and so the more you can connect them to actual policy, that the theories and the research, of those theories, that actually informs policy. I tend to focus Minneapolis domestic violence experiment. I think you're probably all familiar with that. And arrest works best. I think that, and then the follow-up studies showed that, well, maybe not so much. But anyway, we talk about that. You could do specific deterrence would be something like, say, scared straight, and obviously the results don't show that, but that's the theory that kind of informed that policy. Juvenile boot camps, you could use various theories in why those fail, or the success isn't for most of the juvenile boot camps, probably because the follow-up isn't like the military, and they're not given a job. And then stuff that does work is like focused deterrence on hotspots. Recent meta-analyses that have been done show that a lot of those, if they're focused on the right high crime areas, they do tend to work. Weisberg and Braga published a big meta-analysis on that. Next slide. Okay, another thing that I personally do is, instead of waiting to the end of the course to go over, say, violent crimes and property crimes, a lot of the instruction, you just run out of time in a given term, and so often you don't get enough to spend much time. What I do is I integrate the FBI data, the NCVS, stuff like that. I do it right from the very beginning of the course, and try to apply it to a given theory that we happen to be going over. Like what you're seeing there is an arson story, and I often will use that in, say, the developmental chapter, because that's a big red flag for, it's a big predictor of becoming a chronic habitual offender, is to be an arsonist at a young age. So that's just one example, but I try to work those Part 1 index offenses into the courses as we go, instead of waiting till the end. And that also gives them real life examples as well. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone. Another thing, next slide, that I like to do, yeah, there we go, is, with the internet and social media and all this, I think the globe, the regions of the world are connected more so now than ever before. I think you'd agree with that. And I think to see cultural differences and opportunistic things as well is to do comparative criminology, and I try to include that quite a bit, is usually comparing us to the more developed countries, but not always. And you can make these really exciting. At least, I think that they're cool findings. Like one of the ones that I use is comparing beer consumption rates around the world to assault rates. And there's a strong correlation, big surprise. You could also do it with liquor and assault, or murder for that matter. And it doesn't have to be international. I also like to cover comparing homicide rates or motor vehicle theft rates across various regions and cities in the United States. And I think students eat that up too. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, there we go. And these last two slides, at least content-wise, they are just summing up what we've already gone over. I'm not going to repeat everything, but I will focus on the teaching tip number 3 there in the bottom right. If I had to, the most feedback I get from students, positive feedback, is that they love when I use those weird crimes, and they almost universally say that it helps them remember what they thought would be abstract theories. If they got, and that goes to teaching tip number 2, that you can use these weird crimes as, you know, kind of their poster child examples for remembering the theories. And then the last slide gives the other teaching tips that we've already gone over. I hope you got something out of what we've been talking about, and I look forward to answering your questions and hearing your feedback. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your presentation today, Dr. Tibbetts. We're going to move into our question and answer session. Again, we're going to be answering those questions that have come in through the question and answer box to the right or bottom of the main presentation screen, or those that have come from Twitter using the hashtag SageTalks. Continue sending those in, and we'll answer as many questions as we can in the rest of our time today. So, Dr. Tibbetts, one of the first questions that I have is, how do you respond when students ask which is the right theory to explain criminal behavior?
Oh, that's a very good question, and the way it totally depends on the context and the circumstances. Will give you the theory that explains it. You can have the same act and have, based on the circumstances and the context, same exact act, but given the circumstances, you could have dozens of theories explaining the same act. So you would just have to look at what you think the context, what the offender was thinking, etc. And that's going to give you your answer of which theory or theories best explain it in that particular situation. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you. Another question we had come in, how big of a class do online discussion boards work for? For example, my classes are 70 and I have a class of 300.
Oh my gosh. I remember those days. Yeah, 300, it would be very, very tough. Now, what you probably could do in those type of situations, and 70 is also very large, and what you could do is not that they would be grading them per se, because you wouldn't want to really have peers giving the grades to each other, but what you could do is have the peers rate each other's responses on a scale of, say, 1 to 10, or you'd have to come up with that, like a rubric for that on your own. But I would say that they could give feedback to each other to save you some time. You ultimately would want to be doing the grades, but you could use those inter-rater feedback those scores. That would probably save you a lot of time. But you're still talking 300. I certainly probably wouldn't do one a week if that was the case. But it's still doable. You would probably just have to limit how many forums that you have. Maybe get it down to like maybe a handful for the whole term. I hope that answered your question.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Tibbetts. Another question we have is, how do you address misconceptions students might have about who commits crime and why? So, for example, that minorities commit more crime, or that victims of rape are somehow complicit. Anything along those lines?
Well, I'll focus on the first example, like minorities, because obviously that's they're both sensitive topics. But I tend to be very fact-driven about it. I sympathize with the way it's handled. I do present it in a kind of a sensitive way, but I'm mainly fact-based. So we look at what the studies show, and they show that minorities are, and then this is where I think my approach is a good one. What I tell within race and ethnicity. So a good example of that would be whites tend to offend whites, Hispanics tend to offend Hispanics, and African Americans tend to offend, by far, African Americans, especially for homicide and such. So if you approach that type of thing by presenting the victim rates usually first, and then talk about the offending rates. So that's the way I approach that.
Thank you, Dr. Tibbetts. Another question we have is, how do you keep students engaged in an online environment?
Well, the use of discussion boards, I think, is the way that I do it. And again, it would be harder with the bigger classes, but a lot of my classes that are hybrid and online, I usually can go do a number of, quite a few discussion boards, as long as it's, like 30, 35 students. I find that that's pretty manageable. In fact, I often will have 2 a week, and that's what I use to engage them the most if it's a hybrid or online class. I mean, for the hybrids, we still meet face-to-face, and so, we talk about kind of the discussion forums there too. But the thing, like I said in my presentation, is the discussion boards are valuable because instead of having, and we all have that, where you have the same 4 or 5 students that always raise their hand, always are commenting, which is great, but the discussion boards will basically make it mandatory that the other students chime in too. Otherwise, they're going to lose a lot of points. And so it gets everyone talking. I guess that's my point.
Thanks,
okay.
Thanks, Dr. Tibbetts. We have another question that just came in. Which theory is suitable for examining comparative criminology?
Oh, it depends completely on the actual, what the rates show and things like that. So, what I tend to, it just totally depends. Like often it's either routine activities theory or deterrence, depending on, if certain countries just have corrupt police or people don't trust the police, etc. So you can have lack of deterrence. It just depends on what the crime is and where you're comparing it to. Sometimes it's kind of a guess, like why is California always in the top, usually like top 7 out of the top 10 for motor vehicle theft? And so you kind of have to just, you could actually give them examples of, well, which theories do they think explain that? And the good thing about teaching criminology is that almost everybody has an opinion. It's maybe not always the right opinion, but it's a very easy topic to teach, and because a lot of people do have very vocal, strong opinions, and they who doesn't like a cool, weird crime story? So it's good, and there's comparative criminology courses, and like that example that I gave you, a lot of the comparative criminology things I actually got out of a Sage book. It's called The World of Crime by Van Dyke. He's got a Dutch spelling, so it doesn't really look like that, but it's Van Dyke. And in it, he goes through so many crimes, and he gives these charts, and like the beer consumption related to the assault rates. By the way, Ireland was a big standout. So sometimes stereotypes are somewhat true. Actually, on that chart, U.S. was about in the middle for the assault rates and for beer consumption. I thought it'd be higher for both, but it wasn't. We fell somewhere in the middle. And he was looking at about 40, 50 different countries, but Ireland was the big standout. So going back to your original question about how do you know which theory to use, it's going to depend on the situation and where you're comparing. You know, obviously, if you're comparing, say, Detroit or Flint, Michigan to Thousand Oaks, California, well, it's going to be pretty easy to say, you know, unemployment, poverty, so strain theory is certainly there. The social disorganization theory, the Chicago School, they just reek of those differences, you know, in explaining why Flint and Detroit are so bad, crime rate wise. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Dr. Tibbetts. We have one last question that I think just came in. Do you have any additional examples of weird crimes you use in your class? Or do you have a list of these weird crimes that you could provide to get us started?
Oh, do I? I collect them, basically. I've been doing that ever since I started teaching over 20 years ago. Doesn't seem like that long because I love it still. But, and yes, a great place to find a lot of these weird crimes is in our new book that I did with Dr. Pamela Schramm, who's also here at Cal State San Bernardino. And she's actually an associate dean now, but we've done 2 editions of the book, and we have a very good working relationship. And in each chapter, we have some weird crimes. And furthermore, if that's not as a long enough list for you, the ebook version of this, I spent 2 full days at Sage in Thousand Oaks, California. Spent 2 entire days doing videotape interviews or videotapes about about other weird crimes that aren't in the actual textbook. And it's basically, what were they thinking? Because I think that's what we titled the little category in the ebook. And there's so many, and I mean it's more whittling down which ones are the best. Like in the book, I talk about the most arrested person in the United States. They think it's this guy named Henry Earl. I spent a whole page on that. It's mostly public intoxication and stuff like that. He's kind of like, but at that time that we did the research for the book, he had been arrested over 1,300 times. So he has 1 million mugshots. I don't think they do one every time he gets arrested because he's there every day. But he's in Kentucky, by the way, Lexington. And so that's just an example. And I think, I forget where we put that, but I think that was also in developmental theory, because people always ask, well, what's persistent offending mean? Well, that's a great example. He is, again, I wasn't exaggerating. He's been arrested over 1,300 times. And there are people that have been arrested hundreds of times all across the United States. And so there's a bunch of stories like that. Then every once in a while you'll see some really weird ones, like somebody smuggled 30 items in their anus into jail. And 30 items. I mean, some weren't that big, but nonetheless, it was 30 items. And those included things like a coupon for a drugstore that actually had expired, a lip balm. This guy had lip balm in his butt. And some of the other items were just, it was crazy, like a receipt from like a drugstore. It just, the list was really, really bizarre. But anyhow, a lot of, if you want a good list, our book, and it's actually titled Why Do They Do It? It's Introduction to Criminology. Why do they do it is the subtitle. And again, I did that with Dr. Pamela Schramm, S-C-H-R-A-M, and that is available right now. So.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tibbetts. We visit
Thanks to the audience. Thank you for participating.
And you can visit sagepub.com/sagetalks for more information. Have a great day.
Bye.